Jim. Thank you. So if you haven't guessed by now, the theme of today's service is love and the many expressions of love. And it will be presented by the worship team. So love is the doctrine of this church, as you know. I also love my wife dearly. I love my dog and I love my cats. I love a good bottle of wine. I love a nice dinner. I love to kayak. And I love this congregation and what this church stands for. But you can see by my words that the English language does not really do justice to the word love. So I want to present to you a language that does. The Greek language does a very nice job of differentiating the many expressions of love. So we start with eros. Eros is a sexual or passionate love, modern construct of what we would call romantic love. Next we have philia. Philia is friendship or a shared goodwill. Aristotle believed that a person can have goodwill to another for one of three reasons: that he is useful, that sounds like an asset, that he is pleasant, and that he is good. A rational and virtuous. And for Plato, friendship, which lovers have for each other, has philia that comes out of eros. So you can see how one can blend into the other. The next is storge. Storge is familial love, which is the love between a parent and their children. Storge is the foundation born out of familiarity or dependency. There are stages of romantic relationships that eros tends to mutate into storge. And then we have agape, which is universal love, the love for strangers, nature, or God. It's also called charity. It encompasses the modern concept of altruism, defined as unselfish concerns for the welfare of others. Then we have ludus. Ludus is a playful or uncommitted love. It involves activities such as teasing and dancing, or maybe even flirting and seducing or conjugating. The focus is on fun. And ludus sometimes also is conquest with no strings attached. The ludus relationship is casual, undemanding, and uncomplicated, but can very much be long-lasting. And then we have pragma, which is the practical love founded on reason or duty. Sexual attraction takes a back seat in favor of the personal qualities and compatibility, shared goals, and making it work. The days of arranged marriages, or pragma. Pragma must have been very common in those days. And polar opposites, or romantic love, remains widespread and must visibly be certain high-profile celebrities and political pairings can be pragma. And then we have philotia. Philotia is self-love, which can be healthy or unhealthy. It can lead to hubris, or like certain modern politicians, above the greater good. Today, hubris has come to mean an inflated sense of one's self or one's status, abilities, and accomplishments, especially when accompanied by haughtiness or arrogance. Healthy self-love, on the other hand, is akin to self-esteem or self-worth. And in closing, there's, of course, a kind of porosity between these types of love, which keep a seeping and possible passing from one to the other. So those are the 7 words for love in Greek, and I thought I'd throw in a bonus. Amor fati, Italian for the practice of accepting and embracing everything that has happened, is happening, and will happen to you. The love of fate. And now I'd like to ask Alex Lamont to come and share his expression of love. Thank you, Alex. I shall disappear.
Thanks, Django. I am going to preface this with saying that I am not an expert on love. You can just ask my wife. So I'm not going to say anything about anything universal. I'll just share with you my personal experience of one kind of love, specifically the love for my children. Before I had kids, I didn't really know what to expect, loving my kids. I thought it would be sort of like when I loved my parents, and that was like the air that was around me. It was there all the time. I didn't always think about it, didn't notice it. I could see it sometimes. It affected my life, but it was just sort of there. It wasn't something I thought about deeply. The love for my children was more like diving into the water. Immediately noticeable, very different, and sometimes challenging. Before they were born, I kind of loved the idea of them, and that was a very intellectual love. But when, one minute I had an idea of loving a child, and the next minute, or in my son's case, 31 hours later, there was the child, and it was totally different. It was a different love. It felt different, and it was a love that was for such a vulnerable child, and it made me vulnerable too. It was a love filled with fear at the beginning. Would he make it through the night? Is he going to get enough to eat? Is he healthy? Constantly afraid, and oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And feeling inadequate. So it was a love that was challenging, and it was one that was very painful at times. And last night I was talking with my wife about giving this talk. She said, well, has loving your children made you more loving overall and, towards everyone? And my initial answer was no. And the reason I say that is, I had to get tougher, right? When you love this little creature, it's like they're screaming and crying and they're unhappy with you, and it's like all you need to do is burp. Come on, just burp and you're gonna feel so much better. And it's like they're blaming you for this pain they have, and it's like, oh, it hurts me too, and you gotta get tougher. But that's not the whole story of having to toughen up to love your child and keep your heart open through all that difficulty. There's more to it, and as I thought about it more, I realized, it used to be before I had kids, when I heard a sad story of something that happened to a child, I'd oh, that's horrible. Okay, now move on. And now I can actually feel it. It's like, oh my gosh, what if that happened to my child? So in some ways I've had to get tougher, but it's also opened my heart and my mind to so much more in life. And it's really just, I never would have expected it before I had kids. So thank you for listening to my story. Next, I'd like to invite Kirk up.
I have just a couple of short anecdotes that they're related. The first was a recent conversation with an acquaintance, and the second one was a childhood memory. The acquaintance was telling me about difficulty she was having with her teenage son. He was being disrespectful and just basically being an obnoxious jerk. And she started crying during the conversation because she didn't know what to do. I mean, she loved him so much, and he was not reciprocating that feeling. And I didn't quite know what to make of it, and I told her, well, being a teenager is difficult for just about everybody, But then I said, I think it's some point, this is going to be awful in the short term, but I think in the long term, everybody will realize at some point in their life that there's really not that many people in this world that actually love you. I mean, if you were to put your fingers up in the air, you would be hard pressed to fill them all up. And I suspect that one day, and I told her, I suspect that one day, I don't know when, that he will probably realize that you were one of those very few fingers up in the air, and he'll be apologetic about his behavior now. But that kind of struck a chord with me, because I did the same thing when I was a teenager, and I couldn't tell you, looking back on it, why I was doing that. I think you're trying to be independent and prove to your parents that you're just as tough as they are. And I kind of grew out of it. I couldn't tell you why I started it or when I stopped it, but I do remember that period in my life. And then the childhood memory was maybe 5. I'm not quite sure the age. I was quite young. And I was by myself, and I was running along, and I tripped and fell, and I skinned my knee. And when I say skinned my knee, I basically tore the skin off my kneecap. I mean, there was a lot of blood. I mean, and for a small child, that's a very impressive thing. And to be honest with you, that's probably the most of my blood I've ever seen in my entire life. And I started crying, but I was by myself. And I quickly realized that I was kind of wasting my energy, because there was no one there to give me any sympathy. But I knew there was someone. So I basically limped home, and it was a significant injury. And I got to the steps of my house, and I promptly collapsed in tears. And of course, my mother heard me crying. She came out, and she did exactly what I was hoping she would do, which was, to make me feel loved, and, she was so sorry, and she was going to take care of me. And I always felt guilty, because I thought I'd sort of played her a little bit, because I wasn't dying, and I did walk home, and I said, there's no point crying until I get to the front door. But it worked. But I remembered that she was one of those people, and I knew at that age that I could count on her to love me, and I will never forget that. And lastly, I would like to invite up Joy.
So as I mentioned earlier, I research everything. And, I'm a poet, and everybody's like, oh, well, I'm gonna find a poem, a love poem. And I'm like, there are so many beautiful love poems, but they're all romantic, or they're about a flower. And I'm like, this is not what I want to say. And so what I did is I wrote a poem. I wish to find a love poem that speaks of beauty and humanity. The love in 1 Corinthians, patient, kind, not boastful. I wish to find a love poem that is not self-seeking and honors grace and wisdom. The love that Gandhi said will overcome the love of power. I wish to find a love poem that does not delight in evil but rejoices in truth. The love that Einstein defined as the most powerful force of all. I wish to find a love poem that speaks of mercy and justice but does not need to be earned. The love that Lao Tzu said will give you strength and courage. I wish to find a love poem that speaks of the ability to trust not just humanity, but universality. I wish to write this love poem because love never fails.
I hope you loved our presentation.